The Galactic Council declared Earth's resistance would crumble in 6 hours. They brought warships, elite fleets, and centuries of galactic war doctrine. They expected surrender. But they forgot one crucial thing. Humans don't follow predictions. We break them, loudly, violently, and with style. The war lasted only 7 minutes. And those 7 minutes became legend across the stars. They said Earth would fall in 6 hours. The Galactic Council had done the calculations, run the simulations, debated no less than 3 times over the formal wording of their surrender demand. But the conclusion was unanimous. Resistance would be symbolic, dramatic even, but ultimately irrelevant. Chancellor Vratek stood at the center of the council chamber, robed in silver filaments, hands folded in satisfaction as he announced to a galaxy-wide audience. Humanity will be subdued within a single rotational cycle. Their courage is acknowledged. Their defeat is certain. He paused for effect, the way only a creature who had never tasted war could. The chamber applauded with bored elegance. Major Cole Rourke watched the broadcast from a darkened observation deck deep beneath Europa's ice. His face was still, except for the corner of his mouth twitching with a smirk. He leaned forward, dragging his scarred finger across the control interface. Activate HFY. The technician beside him froze. Sir, are we sure we want to? Did I stutter? A breath. A nod. The lights dimmed as the screen flickered. Satellite relays began spinning. Silent pings echoed into space. Nothing flashy. No giant launch. No booming countdown. Just mathematics. On the outer edge of Earth's orbit, what the Council thought were harmless civilian satellites blinked red. 36,000 pieces of orbital debris aligned into a lattice. Not one Ithri strategist noticed. Not until ships began vanishing. The Ithri command carrier Vox Eternum lost contact with 2 scout wings. Then 3. Then 20. The fleet admiral hissed and ordered a tactical scan. No results. No wreckage. Just gaps. Glitches, one of the senior techs said. Nothing else could explain that. And then the Revenant spoke. It wasn't a voice from the ship. It was inside the ship. A single human word echoed across every deck, played backward and forward through the comms simultaneously. Boom! The ship's central data core imploded from within. The Vox Eternum twisted against its own mass, and folded in on itself like wet paper sucked into a drain. The Admiral didn't have time to scream. In less than 90 seconds, 11% of the invasion fleet ceased to exist. Cole leaned back in his seat, sipping recycled coffee. Council predicted 6 hours, huh? He muttered. That's cute. He turned toward the global command feed. Leaders from 20 nations stared back. Presidents, generals, CEOs. They all looked 1 part desperate, 2 parts terrified. Rourke didn't offer comfort. You handed me the keys to end this. So I'm ending it. A delegate from the Pacific Coalition leaned in. You're escalating past council thresholds. You know what that means? Yeah, Rourke said. It means they'll finally see what we built under their noses while they laughed at our politics and called us primitives. Someone else tried to protest. He shut off the channel. Back in orbit, the Ithri fleet realigned, moving with rigid precision. Their response protocol was centuries old, based on military doctrines from 1,000 conquered worlds. It had never failed. Earth didn't follow their playbook. Because Earth didn't write theirs in ink. They wrote it in rage. Revenant nodes activated globally. Unmanned platforms powered by dead men's minds, trained to destroy in ways no alien simulation had ever modeled. They didn't attack head-on. They fractured enemy command chains, spoofed IFF tags, looped weapon targeting systems into their own engines. One cruiser spun mid-flight and unleashed its full payload into its sister ships. Another fired blindly into orbit, hitting nothing but empty void, because its targeting feed was rerouted through a Terran meme server broadcasting 20th century sitcoms. On the moon's far side, Rourke stood inside the Ashfall Nexus. The air shimmered with quantum noise. He placed a gloved hand on the console. Time to go loud. The lattice lit up. Every single Earth-based ashfall device went hot: quantum detonation nodes, frequency inversion torpedoes, void mines seated in orbit since before Earth joined the Council. All hidden in plain sight. They didn't fire missiles. They folded space. A rift opened above Mars. A Council dreadnought drifted halfway into the fold, then closed behind it, slicing it in half and scattering molten hull across 2 planets. The Council was watching. They had a live feed. Their audience of billions gasped. Then panicked. Then screamed. Rourke patched directly into the broadcast. "You predicted our defeat in hours," he said, voice calm, measured, stripped of emotion. "You forgot to ask how long it takes humans to burn a civilization to the ground." He let the silence ride. Then, "We'll settle this in 7 minutes. Check your watches." He ended the transmission. The Ashfall AI took full control. Earth's military no longer needed pilots. It didn't need orders. Every weapon was slave to a single priority algorithm: erase invaders. An alien destroyer tried to flee the system. Its warp drive was sabotaged mid-jump by a fragment of Earth's old Voyager probe, now weaponized with a Revenant payload. It never even got far enough to scream. Ithari survivors began calling for retreat. Some tried to surrender. The Council denied all requests. "Hold your position," they ordered. "Humanity is bluffing." By the time they realized humanity never bluffs, it was too late. Cole Rourke stood alone as the Earth's sun glinted off the cracked ice of Europa. He was watching the Council homeworld. Not on a map. Through a real-time satellite feed beamed through a stolen Council network. Velare. Seat of the Empire. A single projectile launched. Unmanned. Silent. Invisible. It pierced the atmosphere before the planetary defenses even knew it was coming. The screen went white. Then black. Then nothing. Cole didn't speak. He didn't need to. 6 hours? The war ended in 7 minutes. And humanity never sent a fleet. They sent Rourke. The invasion began without warning, but it wasn't unexpected. The sky filled with silver as the Ithari Armada breached low orbit, casting long shadows over continents. Their formation was flawless, rows upon rows of interlocked cruisers, drones, and troop carriers that looked more ceremonial than practical. In their minds, the war had already ended. From their flagship, the alien commanders broadcast one final demand. Earth had 10 minutes to surrender. No reply came. On the surface, Earth's defense grid stayed silent. No fighters scrambled. No nuclear systems came online. The lack of resistance only emboldened the invaders. With synchronized precision, the first wave of troop carriers descended toward urban centers across the planet: New York, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Johannesburg. They expected chaos. Riots. Weak resistance. What they landed in was silence. The first carrier to touch down in Manhattan transmitted cleanly for all of 30 seconds. Then the signal became static. Seconds later, the carrier's hull fractured from within, exploding not from weapons fire, but from internal sabotage. An electromagnetic pulse wave triggered the moment their landing gear made contact with the city's outdated-looking infrastructure. Unbeknownst to the Ithari, the rusted metal poles and crumbling concrete they mocked in every intelligence report were wired with reactive pulse mines. Not human explosives, but AI-guided resonance charges that vibrated at the perfect frequency to unravel composite alien alloys. The result was instant failure. Every ship that landed disintegrated like wet tissue. Then the revenants activated. Every Earthbound city deployed autonomous infantry grown from battlefield neural archives. These weren't robots. They were war avatars coded from the minds of Earth's most ruthless tacticians. No ethics. No hesitation. Just memory-guided execution. They emerged from basements, manholes, sewers, and shattered skyscrapers, operating in units so small they were dismissed as irrelevant, until they brought down Ithari walkers with makeshift EMP coils and scavenged alien tech. One of the Ithari captains, Krell Dovak, barked into the fleet's comm system, demanding extraction from the ruins of Sao Paulo. His transmission came with visual footage, Bodies of his elite guards piled in a collapsed tunnel, a human figure in a scavenged exosuit standing over them with a rail spike launcher welded from old subway metal. She smiled, Krell whispered, blood trailing from his split mandibles. She smiled before the shot. These creatures, they enjoy it. The council watching from orbit dismissed him as compromised. They deployed the second wave. In Berlin, they were met by mobile urban reshapers, massive rigs disguised as city utilities that reconfigured streets into killing corridors. Traps triggered by pressure, sound, and even biometric signatures designed to respond to alien physiology. Inside a dark command bunker beneath Siberia, Cole Rourke monitored the wave front. One screen showed dozens of red blips blinking out in rapid succession. The second screen showed 0 casualties reported from Earth's side. A voice came through the encrypted comms. "They're starting to understand." "Good," Rourke said. "Now we teach them fear." He issued the next directive. Project Hellgate. The code uploaded silently. Deep beneath major cities, cages opened. Biomodified creatures emerged, bears with carbon-spined armor, wolves with thermo-optic disruption skin, swarm drones imprinted with the smell of ethery blood. These weren't war animals. They were vengeance given form. In Tokyo, a ethery battalion fell back into what they thought was a shelter. The walls sealed behind them. The lights flickered red. In the silence, a human voice echoed over an ancient speaker system. "You landed. Now you get to die here." Then came the gas. Then came the blades. In London, a council cruiser hovering above Hyde Park suddenly dipped forward and crashed straight into the Thames. Not because it was shot, but because its autopilot was hijacked. The Earth tech it had scanned hours earlier, dismissed as primitive, was in fact a Trojan. Embedded in power lines. In cell towers. In vending machines. It fed them junk data, until their own ships believed the ground was the sky. Council Command finally broke protocol. They tried to pull the third wave back. Too late. Ashfall had launched. Ashfall's second phase wasn't destructive, it was disorienting. Artificial blackouts took half their command satellites offline. False signals made friendly ships appear hostile. Their own anti-air turrets opened fire on each other in synchronized confusion. In Lagos, a lone human operative dressed in rags approached a grounded ethery unit with hands raised. They scanned him. No weapons. No threat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a candy bar. Then smiled. The soldier hesitated, then dropped. The rest followed. Neural disruption coded into auditory frequencies. The man had no weapon. The weapon was the music playing through a hidden speaker in his chest rig, a waveform designed to mimic ethery pain response patterns. Their armor couldn't block it. Rourke watched the Council's flagship flail from orbit. Command signals looped. Orders overwritten. He opened a secure frequency and spoke directly to the Council. "You thought you understood war," he said, calm as ice. "You studied our missiles, our ships, our cities. But you missed what we're best at." He leaned in, eyes burning. "We weaponized the unthinkable." No reply. Just static. On the ground, alien survivors began transmitting distress calls. Some even begged. One message caught Rourke's attention. "We surrender. Please." "We didn't know." He didn't respond. There was no deal. No negotiation. The invasion was over. It just hadn't finished yet. 7 minutes since the first ship breached orbit. 17 major fleet casualties. No human fatalities confirmed. Rourke closed his comms, his expression flat. "They wanted a war," he whispered. "We gave them an education." The ground quaked as the final fallback command triggered beneath the Pacific Ocean. A ripple tore through the sea. A new kind of silence followed. Earth never surrendered. Because Earth was never cornered. It was waiting. The ethery expected resistance to collapse by now. Instead, they were trying to hold the wreckage of their own command structure together as Earth turned every inch of the planet into a weapon. By the 10th minute of the invasion, entire cities had already swallowed their landing crews. They weren't met with armies. They were swallowed by concrete that bit back, by neighborhoods that rewrote physics, by silence that struck harder than any cannon. Council commanders rerouted surviving battalions to secure positions in what they believed were undefended regions. Rural sectors. Outlying zones. Forests, deserts, fields. But nothing on Earth was untouched. As the transport carriers touched down, they triggered dormant code buried in the soil, old farming drones repurposed for violence, chemical clouds that ate through alien skin, thermal mirages that redirected their vision into dead ends. Entire platoons vanished in minutes without a single shot fired. In the ruined outskirts of Istanbul, a HFY war leader named Sorkel led what was left of his division into a derelict industrial plant. The buildings were gutted, machinery still rusted in place. His troops sealed the entrances and began to regroup. 3 minutes in, the walls began to hum. A voice echoed through the structure. Human. Calm. Thanks for bringing yourselves indoors. Easier cleanup. Sorkel drew his plasma blade and barked orders. His translator struggled to interpret the feedback loop being broadcast from the speaker system. Then one of his men opened a door. Behind it stood a humanoid figure, wrapped in scorched combat armor, face masked in steel and ash. It held a thermite spear. And it was smiling. 3 seconds later, the room exploded. Across the globe, similar confrontations erupted. Short, savage, calculated. Human ground teams weren't large. They weren't even teams, in most cases. Just remnants. Veterans. Exiles. Civilians armed with alien rifles duct taped to hunting scopes. But they fought with a ferocity that made no tactical sense to the HFY. One of the survivors captured in Norway was interrogated through a neural translator. His eyes trembled as he spoke. They weren't trying to push us back. They were leading us into traps. Every step forward, we were already flanked. We didn't see them. We only heard the laughter. The council stopped broadcasting confidence. Emergency encryption replaced open channels. Fleet leaders screamed at each other in 16 dialects, trying to make sense of a war that had become an execution. From orbit, a HFY dreadnought released a solar penetration beam designed to erase a 10-mile radius. It hit its mark, an abandoned steel refinery in northern Russia. The beam burned white-hot through the atmosphere, melting terrain and wiping out every sensor in the area. 10 seconds later, the dreadnought's systems froze. The ground-based detonation had been a feint. While they focused their firepower, a Revenant drone slipped into their lower hull through a maintenance duct that didn't exist in Council blueprints. It detonated at the exact moment the firing capacitor overloaded. The ship cracked from stern to bridge in one long, silent burst, then collapsed into the sea below, dragging a second cruiser with it. Rourke watched the satellite feed. No celebration. No commentary. Just a satisfied nod. A junior tactician turned to him. Sir, they're requesting a ceasefire. Begging for dialogue. Did they offer dialogue when they fired first? Rourke asked. No, sir. Then we're not accepting apologies from corpses. Word-of-Earth's response spread fast. Pirate frequencies. Underground broadcasts. Entire planets began deleting messages from the Council, afraid that opening one might trigger the same fate. Meanwhile, the Revenants were still evolving. The AI cores, built from the minds of soldiers who had died in past wars, began adapting to alien strategies faster than expected. Each engagement became shorter, more efficient. They stopped targeting weapons and started targeting morale. One Revenant hacked into a HFY battleship's navigation system and redirected their emergency escape pods, right into their own minefield. A message followed. Running's not cowardice. It's consent. In Hong Kong, 2 Council heavy transports dropped ground tanks designed to level cities. The tanks never moved. They were swallowed by the streets, literal sinkholes triggered by seismic reshaping devices buried by Earth engineers 2 years prior. As the tanks vanished, drones rose from the depths and projected footage of the Council's failed invasion on every nearby screen, accompanied by music that had once played during Earth's sports matches. This wasn't war. It was demolition theater. The Ithari finally understood. This wasn't about fighting back. It was about punishment. Deliberate, strategic, and unrelenting. And still, Rourke hadn't used the final protocol. Deep beneath Antarctica, locked inside a vault only 3 men on Earth could open, rested the Ragnarok's silo. Not a missile. Not a bomb. A space-bending weapon designed not to destroy planets, but to erase the idea of control. Rourke considered the button. One of the Earth Command overseers patched through. "Sir, if we deploy Ragnarok, it's irreversible. Entire star sectors are irrelevant," Rourke said. "This isn't about holding territory. It's about ending the illusion that they were ever in charge." He didn't press the button. Not yet. Instead, he sent a final message to the Council fleet. "You arrived expecting conquest. What you got was your first lesson in consequence. You thought we'd fight by your rules. We don't have rules anymore. You made this personal. Now we're making it permanent." He cut the feed. Around the globe, Earth forces stopped pursuing. The Revenants didn't. They continued cleaning up remnants. Not prisoners. No surrender accepted. It wasn't hatred, it was protocol. They were designed to finish what others started. 12 minutes since the first strike. 14,000 alien casualties. Human casualties? 12. Most from friendly fire. Rourke stood in the war room, silent. He hadn't won. He'd made sure there was no contest. This wasn't a defense. This was a reckoning. The Council believed the worst was over. They believed wrong. As Earth fell silent again, they mistook it for surrender. Their fragmented forces reassembled into defensive clusters, licking their wounds and preparing contingency strategies they hoped might hold what little ground they had left. But Earth didn't need more ground. It didn't need time. It needed only one final decision. Cole Rourke stood alone in the Europa command chamber, a dim pulse of light bathing him in a cold glow from the Ragnarok terminal. No one else had access. No one else had the authority. He stared at the biometric interface, a relic built not to control war, but to end it. The message came through again. It was the 4th one in 3 minutes. "This is Ithari High Commander Sedval. We request terms. Immediate ceasefire. We acknowledge Earth's strategic superiority. We request." He cut it off with a gesture. They didn't want peace. They wanted time to rebuild. They wanted time to figure out what just happened. They thought negotiations would save them. But humans hadn't come for compromise. Earth wasn't here to balance diplomacy with victory. Earth had come to dismantle everything that let the Ithri believe they were untouchable. Rourke keyed the launch pre-sequence. Command override requested. He placed his palm on the interface. "You sure about this?" the system asked. "Yes," he replied. "Specify target. Velare Prime." The machine paused. "Council Homeworld acknowledged. Confirm deployment of gravitational core disruptor. Confirm." His voice didn't shake. He turned toward the wide display as space unfolded. Ragnarok wasn't a weapon of mass destruction. It was a weapon of irreversible decision. The launch wasn't visible. No flare. No propulsion. It was simply there, and then it wasn't, moving faster than detection, folding through subspace like a whispered curse aimed straight into the heart of their empire. At that very moment, the Council convened on Velare. Their central chamber had never been attacked in recorded history. The idea was inconceivable. That was why they were there, scrambling, demanding accountability, shouting blame at each other in voices that shook columns of marble. They still thought they had time. Until they didn't. Rourke watched through a satellite relay hacked into their internal surveillance. A calm stillness washed over him as the feed trembled. It wasn't fire. It wasn't debris. The transmission shimmered, stuttered, then fractured. Gravity cracked. Buildings twisted like rope. Towers curved in on themselves. Not with violence. With inevitability. A single point opened in the sky above Velare, like space had blinked. Light bled inward. Not out. The planet's course shifted, then crumpled, folding its own laws inward. The continents snapped. The oceans convulsed upward, then flattened as if the world exhaled its last breath through broken lungs. Then silence. Impact complete, the system confirmed. He closed the feed. There would be no survivors. No government left to negotiate. No central seat to reoccupy. The empire didn't fall, it ceased. Rourke didn't speak. He had no speech prepared. No declaration of victory. He hadn't come to inspire. He came to finish what they started. He walked away from the console. A soldier approached him, young, unsure. "Sir, it's done." He nodded. "It's done." The Revenant network confirmed phase termination. All active nodes were ordered into dormancy. They didn't celebrate. They didn't chant. They simply shut down, awaiting new threats. Earth streets quiet. Cities still burned from earlier conflict, but nothing new came. No more landings. No more alarms. In the outer systems, the ripple effect began immediately. Council-aligned colonies initiated panic evacuations. Alliances collapsed. Long-dormant rivalries resurfaced among other species who had lived under Ithri protection for centuries. Earth had turned the galaxy's political balance into a pile of dust. Rourke addressed the world only once. The broadcast went out raw. No cuts. No edits. "This wasn't a war," he said, eyes steady. "This was a correction. For generations, they believed they could weigh us, measure us, predict us. They mistook patience for weakness. They mistook silence for surrender. They calculated our defeat down to the minute. And we ended them in less." He paused. "We will not occupy. We will not rule. But understand this, if you raise weapons against Earth again, you will meet the end before you even know it began." He ended the message there. It echoed for years. Other species watched with awe, terror, and something more dangerous, admiration. Not because Earth had weapons. Because Earth had resolve. Cold, merciless, absolute resolve. That was what no simulation could predict. Back on Europa, Rourke stood outside the facility for the first time in days. The ice wind bit through his uniform. He liked it that way. It reminded him that he was still human. Someone behind him asked the question nobody had dared yet. "What now?" Rourke didn't look back. "Now we disappear. Let the galaxy live in fear of the next message. You think they'll ever try again?" "They won't," he said. "They'll teach their children to fear the word human. Not out of hate. Out of memory." He walked toward the transport without another word. He didn't need to lead anymore. Earth had already spoken. And in 7 minutes the galaxy had learned to listen. The war had no end date because no one had expected it to end so quickly. The Ithri Council had entered Earth's orbit with timelines, strategies, and speeches prepared for a ceremonial surrender. What they received instead was a collapse so absolute, so final, that even their enemies struggled to comprehend it. Cole Rourke didn't wait for applause. He returned to the shadows from which he'd operated, leaving Earth's leaders to manage the political aftermath of what was, by every measure, the fastest total defeat of an interstellar power in recorded history. But there were no parades. No medals. Not for this kind of war. You don't celebrate extinction. You record it quietly. A week after Ragnarok, fragments of the Ithri fleet continued drifting across multiple star sectors. Communication ceased. Automated signals pinged unanswered from what remained of their outposts. Their colonies weren't attacked. They were left untouched, frozen in fear. Their people didn't rise in defiance. They hid. The ones who escaped Velore's annihilation buried their royal crests, deleted their fleet registries, and removed all mention of Earth from public databases. They were trying to erase the memory before it could scar their culture forever. But Earth remembered everything. In the subterranean archive beneath what used to be Geneva, a classified report was finalized and stamped with a warning: "Do not unseal without absolute necessity." Inside it were the tactical logs, satellite footage, decoded transmissions, and full psychological profiles of every Ithri fleet commander who died during the invasion. It was a document of precision, not revenge. A record of finality. Rourke's name appeared only once in the appendix. He didn't need recognition. What mattered was the silence. The Revenant AI systems were archived as well, locked beneath secure cryptographic keys distributed across 23 locations on Earth and Mars. They weren't deleted. They were preserved, because someone, someday, would forget. And when that happened, Earth wouldn't start over. It would resume where it left off. In a secure message sent to the Mars Strategic Council, Rourke left his last instruction. Let fear be our deterrent. Let myth do the rest. That myth spread faster than any council transmission had ever traveled. In the outer colonies of the former Alliance, children were taught to never speak Earth's name aloud. Traders whispered of the day the humans bent gravity and cracked stars with math. Even pirates refused to chart a course near Sol. No official declaration of peace was signed. No treaty existed. There was simply no one left to negotiate on behalf of the Council. Earth hadn't won a war. It had dismantled an order. And it hadn't needed an empire to do it. Just discipline. And the will to be terrifying. Meanwhile, smaller civilizations across the galactic rim cautiously reached out, tentatively, humbly. They offer no demands, only quiet requests to trade, learn, and observe. Earth accepted selectively. It did not expand. It curated. The message was clear: we will talk to those who respect silence. Within Earth Command, debates emerged about whether the show of force had gone too far. Whether they could have accepted surrender, spared the Council worlds, or negotiated a ceasefire. The answer remained the same. They didn't come to talk. They came to take. The day they crossed orbit with warships instead of ambassadors, they forfeited mercy. And that understanding shaped policy for generations. Rourke never returned to public life. He disappeared from the global registry, his identity flagged as dormant. Some believed he uploaded himself into the Revenant network, that he became the ghost behind every algorithm watching the skies. Others insisted he'd retired to some forgotten moon, content that his job was done. But his name remained sacred in silence. Years passed, and the story became harder to explain. The younger generation, raised under peace, couldn't grasp how close Earth had come to annihilation. Schools simplified the timeline. Politicians softened the language. Military academies still taught the operation, but in abstract. Students trained in tactics written by a man none of them ever met, whose image never appeared in history books. Until the signal came. 12 years after the war ended, a pulse reached Earth from the edge of Andromeda. A single phrase, encrypted in a Council-era frequency, translated loosely into, "We are coming to reclaim what is ours." The message lasted less than 3 seconds before it was scrubbed. But not before Earth's systems logged the origin. No one panicked. No orders were issued. There were no emergency meetings. Instead, a small light flickered inside the deepest chamber of the Geneva archive. The Revenant systems reinitialized, silently scanning for signature matches. 47 assets activated for low-power monitoring. None were deployed. No ships left orbit. No weapons fired. But the galaxy felt the temperature drop. Because every civilization that survived the First War had one thing in common: they built their societies around the unspoken rule: do not provoke Earth. When asked by his grandson many years later why humanity never struck again, Admiral Tierce, one of Rourke's few living colleagues, answered simply, "Because we don't enjoy war. We just don't tolerate arrogance." The grandson nodded, thoughtful. Then Tierce added, "And because once you've erased the Council in 7 minutes you realize, that was the polite version. Humanity didn't aim to conquer. It didn't demand obedience. It demanded space. And the galaxy, wisely, gave it. The fear lingered not because of what humans did, but because of what they chose not to do afterward. And so the story endured, whispered across 1,000 systems. The aliens came expecting humanity's surrender in 6 hours. Humanity gave them extinction in 7 minutes. And never said another word.